The 2025 season for the Atlanta Braves couldn't have gotten off to a rougher start as they get swept in a 4-game series in San Diego. The offense goes completely silent in the final 2 games of the series. We're going to break it all down on today's episode of a Locked On Braves, so let's get into it.
You are Locked On Braves, your daily Atlanta Braves podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hey, and welcome back to Locked On Braves, part of Locked On Sports Atlanta, where we cover your favorite Atlanta sports teams each and every day. I'm your host, Jake Mastriani. You can follow me on social media at Shortstop Ball. Check out the podcast there at LockedOn_Braves and on Instagram at Locked On Braves. Make sure you subscribe on YouTube if you're new. Hit that thumbs up button. Leave me a comment down below, as it does help out the show a ton whenever you do those things, and I do really appreciate it. If you're listening on the audio version, you can help out by leaving me a 5-star review on Apple, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcast. And with that out of the way, let's get into the disastrous weekend that was for the Atlanta Braves, getting swept in San Diego. 4 losses to the Padres, and the last 2 looking particularly ugly offensively. I mean, technically they were in every game, but they lost every game, and the offense looked really, really bad. You had the bullpen blow up on Thursday's game, so just not a lot going the Braves' way in this one. And joining me on today's episode is going to be Lindsay Crosby. I promise we're going to get to a postcast at some point. A little delay in getting all that ready, as Lindsay, as you know, is a pretty sketchy character, so the background check on him is taking a little bit longer than usual. But before we do get into that and I bring Lindsay in, today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Right now, new customers can get $200 in bonus bets when your first $5 bet wins. Now that I took a shot at Lindsay while he wasn't here to defend himself. Lindsay, thanks for joining me on the show today to talk about the Atlanta Braves getting swept in San Diego.
Yeah, it's not the way you want to start the season. Thankfully, baseball was the longest sport, like the longest regular season of any sport. So you've got time to get over it, but you got to do it quickly because you're on to LA.
Yeah, I mean, it doesn't get any easier for the Atlanta Braves. The Dodgers start the season 5-0 and look like everything that we thought they would be. So it's going to be a tough task for the Atlanta Braves to try to get that first win of the season. We knew it could be a rough road trip to begin the year. Certainly, you're starting in San Diego and then going to face the Dodgers, but you were really hoping to get at least 1, if not 2 wins in San Diego before you go over to play the Dodgers, who again look like a team that might go 162-0, might have the best chance of anybody in the history of the game. We're going to talk about all 4 games on today's postcast, so apologize for that in advance if you want to go through the misery with us again. But I want to start out talking about Sunday night's game, a 4-0 loss to the Padres. And let's start on the pitching side of things. I know the offense really struggled in the last 2 games, and I definitely want to get into that. But I want to try to look for some positives here. So let's start with A.J. Smith-Shawver, because I think you saw the good and the bad in this with A.J. Smith-Shawver. Ultimately goes 4 innings, gives up 2 runs on 6 hits, 3 walks, 4 strikeouts on 77 pitches. Don't want to push him too hard here in the early going for a 22-year-old, but 13 whiffs in this game, Lindsay, a 43% whiff rate and 32% CSW percentage, which you look at a 43% whiff rate and then you look at just a 32% CSW, which is really good, but it tells you he didn't throw a lot of strikes outside of that, outside of getting the swing to miss. 10 whiffs on 14 swings against the changeup, 6 hard hit balls. He did get hit pretty hard in this game as well. 4 of them went for hits, 2 of them doubles. To me, Lindsay, looked like he just couldn't command that fastball at all. He threw 22 4-seam fastballs. Only 8 of them were inside the zone. And even when they were in the zone, it just didn't seem like he really knew where they were going to be in the zone. And it's really hard to pitch. Snicker talked a little bit about that in the in-game interview, just getting away from that fastball. But I think Trump went away from it because he couldn't command it. He didn't really know where it was going. Obviously, that changeup is a big weapon for him. You saw it in this game. But when you're not able to set it up with that fastball, it makes you a little bit predictable.
Yeah, when you're throwing, one fastball, in this case, the 4-seamer, you've got the curveball, you have the slider, although he calls it a cutter, and then that awesome changeup, everything's predicated on guys having to guard for that fastball for strikes. It's the same issue you see with Hurst and Waldrop sometimes, where that splitter doesn't work because guys aren't worried the fastball is going to be a strike. And for A.J. Smith-Shawver, 0 called strikes on the fastball. Either they swung and they fouled it off, put it into play, or it wasn't in the zone. So a lot of whiffs on the changeup. It's as good as we thought it was, but the 4-seamer has to be better. And I don't necessarily know I didn't see anything today that made me think it can't be, but I didn't see an inning where I said, yeah, he had everything dialed in, and that's an example of what he can do. Ultimately, he got out of the outing with decent stats. It wasn't very deep because he wasn't very efficient. And we've seen this kind of been a theme this weekend of just Brave starters not going deep enough in the games where you don't have to overexpose the bullpen.
And part of that's just, the early season, part of it where pitchers just aren't going to throw 90 to 100 pitches. But even with Smith-Shawver, like I said, 77 pitches, and it just wasn't really efficient, especially in that second inning, throwing a lot of pitches, walking the number 9 hitter to bring Tatis up to the plate. You're just playing with fire there. Like you said, he was able to limit the damage. So it's still kind of the same thing for me with AJ Smith-Shawver. You see the upside. You see the a kid that could be a top of the rotation type of arm, but it's still those inconsistencies with the command and the control, not even necessarily command, just control, being able to throw some strikes when he needs to. I did think he did a little bit better job of when that fastball command wasn't there, able to get the slider or the curveball strikes early in counts. I thought that was good to see. So like I said, definitely some positives to take away from AJ Smith-Shawver in this outing, and you can see the upside for him. Hopefully he gets a couple more turns in the rotation, and then we'll see what happens once Strider comes back. A lot of time between now and then. But let's move to the offensive side of things, where it's really hard to find some positives from this game for the Atlanta Braves offense. I will say they had 5 hard hit balls in this game. That's it. We're used to seeing a Braves offense that has, double-digit hard hit balls in a game, but all 5 of them went for outs, including some loud line outs from Austin Riley and Matt Olson. In this one, Austin Riley hit a line drive to Machado that it took Machado off his feet. I mean, it knocked him backwards. It was hit so hard. So a lot of bad luck for the Braves, certainly in this series altogether. You talk about the balls that ricocheted off Bummer that ultimately won the game on Saturday. You look at the one that Harris hit that went off the pitcher tonight. It went right to Machado for an out that ended up in double play. Don't know what Ozuna's doing there. All that to say, though, it still was some bad performances in the second 2 games of this series for the offense, and particularly tonight. They just could not square anything up against Pivetta consistently.
Yeah, and the big issue for me, it felt like your usual suspects were doing everything they could, right? Austin Riley, 1 hard hit ball, 107.7. Matt Olson had 2 of them. Neither one of them fell for hits. Ozzie Albies and Michael Harris combined 0 for 6. They struck out twice, only 1 hard hit ball between the 2 of them. And it feels like outside of Ozzie's one big game, that part of the order, once you get past the top 4, has been a little bit of a weakness. But overall tonight, it just felt like these guys, like you said, everything went against them. I mean, it was, I can't remember seeing this team 11 for 31 in the series on hard hit balls that actually fell for hits. And anybody who's a stat person knows on a hard hit ball, I think last year it was a 535 batting average for MLB on a hard hit ball. And Atlanta went 11 for 31 in this series. Like, it wasn't a good performance on Sunday, but at the same time, they're getting the quality of contact. It just hasn't yet leveled out like you hope it would.
Yeah, and look, that's definitely part of it. I know fans don't want to hear it, but that is part of the fact that they're just not getting it. But also, I look at the first 2 games of this series, and the offense, grinded out some at-bats. They had some deeper at-bats, made some better contact. Now, maybe that was just Michael King and Dylan Cease weren't on their games, and that was part of it, and maybe Vasquez and Pivetta were. But I get it. The hard contact part of it did not go their way in this one. I also just think there weren't a lot of great at-bats. There weren't a lot of, especially on Sunday, what we're talking about, there weren't a lot of at-bats where they worked themselves into good counts. And look, Pivetta's a guy, it's a fastball at the top of the zone, and then it's a curveball. I know he's got the sweep or 2 off of it, but primarily what his game plan is, and I don't feel like the Braves were prepared for that. And you mentioned, I think you make a great point about Ozzie and Harris, especially the game on Saturday. I think Ozuna had 3 walks. I mean, it felt like they were kind of purposely being very careful with Ozuna and making Ozzie and Michael Harris beat them. And each time those guys came up outside of the Thursday game where Ozzie had the big hit, they just weren't able to come through. 22 innings scoreless streak, Lindsay. I mean, that is just after a season that we saw last year, which was one of the hardest seasons I can remember watching a Braves offense, to start out this year with a 22 inning scoreless streak. A lot of Braves fans rightfully frustrated, I think.
Yeah, and on the Nick Pivetta note, I think the difference for him in the first 2 games was you always thought that both the fastball and the curveball were going to end up in the zone. I think that was the big difference for Pivetta, is Atlanta couldn't ever just take a pitch. They didn't ever feel comfortable that they could take something. They had to swing. A lot of them were awkward swings. Michael Harris swung at a curveball in the dirt. Just something where they were convinced those pitches were going to be strikes. But yeah, I don't want to ascribe any sort of feelings or anything, but Sunday felt different from the rest of the series, right? Good at bats. They saw lots of pitches on Thursday and on Friday in a very uncharacteristic approach for the Braves. They typically don't see a ton of pitches. They like to swing early and often. Sunday was rough showing all around. You have to kind of hope you just flush this and move on. I don't know really what positives you can take out of there. Orlando Arcia had a hit. That was the only hit Atlanta had, was Orlando Arcia's. He also had a hard hit ball, had a good defensive play. I mean, he probably had the best game of anybody on the offensive side. And if Orlando Arcia is having the best game, that kind of tells you what the quality of the game was overall for Atlanta.
Yeah, certainly. I mean, Arcia in a good swing. He shot the ball the other way. I mean, it was, I thought he had some pretty good at-bats on the weekend in the games that he played. And just final note on Pivetta, strikeout pitcher, 4 strikeouts in this game. So, I mean, to your point, he was filling up the strike zone. Braves were putting the ball in play, just weren't getting rewarded for it. Again, not a ton of a great contact, 5 hard hit balls. You're used to seeing them more than that over 7 innings, but still just nothing really falling in anywhere. My final note, before we get into the rest of the weekend, just trying to end this first segment on a positive. Austin Riley, 2 unbelievable defensive plays in this series. I don't know where you land on this. I know some of the metrics don't like Austin Riley as a defender. I think he's a great defender at third base, and he made 2 plays this weekend that were just unreal. Also, Kelnick with a great running catch in the first inning of this game. Jackson Merrill was just destroying the Braves this weekend, and he saved them from doing that in the first inning, making an even bigger first inning. But some really good defensive plays. You mentioned one by Arcia. So there were some good things from the Braves in this series. Again, they were in every single one of these games, just couldn't find the big hit. The bounces didn't go their way, and they didn't play great overall. And that's certainly, I don't want to brush that aside. They did not play great enough or good enough to win these games, but they were in them. And you can see just some small adjustments where they can change things and start to get on a big winning streak. But let's break down the first 3 games in this series, all losses for the Atlanta Braves as well. I want to go a little bit deeper to another difference that I saw between the Padres and who they have at the top of their lineup now and who the Braves don't, and just how big of a difference that made in this series. We'll get into that here next. March Madness is here, and FanDuel is giving you the chance to get in on the action like never before. Right now, new customers can get $200 in bonus bets when your first $5 bet wins. That's $200 extra bucks to use on everything from buzzer beaters to Cinderella stories. Not sure how many of those are left, and even who's cutting down the nets. If you've got your eye on a few underdogs, FanDuel makes it easy to back them with spreads, totals, and game props. The FanDuel app is simple to use, and when you win, you get paid instantly. No waiting around. And if you've moved on from the basketball season and you're into the Major League Baseball season and you got the Braves going 0-162, you can see all of those odds over on FanDuel.com to get in on the baseball action. Also, make sure you visit FanDuel.com/play-safe for tools and resources to help you stay in control of the way that you play. Visit FanDuel.com and get in on the college hoops all tournament long. Well, Lindsay, it was a disappointing weekend for the Atlanta Braves, and I know we didn't have any postcast over the weekend. I kind of made a joke about that at the beginning, but we are going to get back to those through the season. I want to take just a moment to let you kind of talk about what the postcast is going to look like this year, because it's going to be a little bit different. So if you want to, just for a few minutes here, let's talk about the postcast and what's going to be coming your way, or their way, the listeners' way this season.
Yeah, so it's going to be a little bit shorter. The goal is to go live almost immediately after a game. I think we said within 5 minutes of the game ending, we're going to go live.
Kind of like we did tonight a little bit.
Yeah. And it's going to be 15 to 20 minutes, right? We're going to have a couple big things that we're looking for. Just, we want to kind of identify what was the turning point of this game, right? Who was the player of the game? What's the thing you're going to be talking about at work tomorrow, right? We're going to identify a couple things like that, but it's going to be a little bit on the shorter side. Again, 15 minutes or so immediately after the game. Get in. We're going to give you what you need to know, and we're going to let you go on with your night. So that should start hopefully this week. Couple technical things we're trying to work out with getting access to everything, and it will be on the Locked On Sports Atlanta feed on YouTube. It will be on the audio feed for Locked On Braves, but that kicks off again, hopefully this week once we get everything worked out. A little bit of a shorter show, but probably more of them and a little bit sooner after the game ends is kind of the goal here this year.
Yeah, looking forward to that. I love the instant reaction after the game, kind of like we're doing tonight. I mean, we got almost 300 people in here with us live listening tonight, so can't wait to get to that throughout the season. But let's jump into our discussion from the weekend. The Atlanta Braves getting swept in 4 games from the Padres. I'm going to start back on Thursday, and this one to me kind of feels like the most heart-crushing one of it, just because you had a lead late. Like I said, all these games were close and could have gone either way. And for me in that first one, it was just the little things. It was giving up the extra 90 feet to Manny Machado in the first inning that leads to an extra run. The Padres stealing 5 bases in that game. In that first inning, you had bases loaded, 1 out. Ozzie comes up. He thankfully beats out a double player. They wouldn't have gotten anything in that inning. And then Michael Harris can't add on to it. And it was just kind of those little things all throughout the game. King clearly didn't have his best stuff. The Braves didn't help him. They made him work, got him out of the game early, put some runs on him, got in some favorable counts, as Ozzie did when he hit that big home run. Riley had a home run. I think it was the only run the Braves scored off the Padres bullpen all weekend. They went with the decision in this one to go with Neris in the 7th inning. I kind of saw some of your take over the weekend where maybe defending it a little bit, or at least the rationalization behind it. I don't agree with it, obviously, in hindsight, but I don't know who else you go with. Like we talked about this before the season. You're going to have to put guys in roles that you don't feel comfortable in, and you're going to have to try to figure things out with this bullpen. I feel like Daysbel was the guy that should have gone there in that situation. I think maybe you go to Neris because it was the bottom of the order, try to give him a chance to ease into that. But a guy that didn't get a lot of reps in spring training, obviously looks a little rusty, even in the game on Sunday that he pitched, looked a little rusty. I mean, that's just, I feel like Daysbel was the right, and obviously I'm playing this in hindsight, but even at the time, it just felt like the right move. But again, it's just where you are at with the bullpen. You got some guys that you're going to have to trust to get some of these big outs for you.
Yeah. I mean, I understand if it was the top of the order versus the bottom of the order. I think this was a situation where they want to go to a righty there, and you've got 3 options, right? And who do you trust more, right? Do you trust the veteran in Hector Neris, which we all know Snit likes the veterans. Like, he defers to veterans whenever he can, or the younger player? You've seen more of him in person in Daysbel because he's been in your bullpen, in your organization. He pitched more in spring. Or you can do the untested guy in Iñigo de los Santos. And I would have been fine ultimately with either Neris or Daysbel. The one point that I will make to everybody, though, who kind of doesn't necessarily gets frustrated about the home run, that was a good pitch. Like, I think everybody has to understand, full count, a dotted fastball up and away to, that was a good pitch that he threw. They got hit for a homer. And you saw Gavin Sheets got a hit on a changeup below the zone on Sunday. Another good pitch from AJ Smith-Shawver. Maybe he's just for some reason, maybe Gavin Sheets is having a breakout. We're going to come back and he's going to win the MVP this year. We're all going to look dumb for questioning why Gavin Sheets was so good this weekend. But I'll argue it was a good pitch, and it just was a better piece of hitting from Gavin Sheets.
Yeah, quick story on Gavin Sheets. I live in Birmingham where the Barons play, and I got to watch a lot of Gavin Sheets. Luis Robert, 2 of the most impressive bats that I've seen come through Birmingham in a while. Gavin Sheets hit the ball extremely hard. Never could get it going with the White Sox. Like you said, he had some really good at-bats this weekend for the Padres. Maybe he has unlocked something there. But that was game 1 of the series. Had a lead late. Bullpen let it get away. Like I said, even within that game, yes, it was the bullpen that blew it, but there were just some little things in that game, giving some free 90 feet to the other team, some clutch hitting, certainly by the Padres. Braves offense not doing anything really late in that game to really help things out either. Yeah, go ahead.
Sorry, before we move off of that, one note is Profar and Baldwin combined in that game, 9 at-bats, 73 pitches saw. Like, that's a huge improvement, and I think a big part of why King was out so early and the Braves did what they did is those guys grinded out long at-bats, and that's something we haven't necessarily had on this team in a very long time.
Yeah, and I thought that was great. Like I said, in the first two games, I think you saw a lot of those at bats. And I know Baldwin didn't pick up a lot of hits on the weekend. I think most Braves fans were pretty impressed with
Yeah.
what we saw with Drake Baldwin in the first three games. Saw a lot of that on X over the weekend. Braves fans pretty excited with Drake Baldwin, some good contacts, some good at bats. And coming into the season, that's what I said. Braves need more bats like that in the lineup. To really work the count, hopefully start getting on base, those two in particular, and start getting some good results for their good at bats and good swings. But yeah, good point there from Profar and Baldwin. Game 2 of the series on Friday. Again, the offense made Dylan Cease work. We're able to get him out of the game early, but they just couldn't get anything going against that bullpen. That Padres bullpen, I posted it on X over the weekend. It may be the best in baseball. If not, it is certainly right up there, and we got to see that difference really in these two pins. And look, outside of Neris, I know we talked about this before going on, the pin for the Braves wasn't bad this weekend, but that Padres bullpen was just lights out. There was really no chance for the Braves in this one. On the starting side of things for the Atlanta Braves, Ronaldo Lopez eased some of my concerns. I know it wasn't necessarily a great performance from him, but you saw the fastball velo back. It was really down in spring training, had you worried a little bit. They did not chase that slider at all in this game. And it was just crazy. Some of them were really good. I mean, some really tight sliders that were breaking off the plate, and they just did not chase it. And so it really left him where he only had the fastball, and yet he still, was able to keep his team in the game.
Yeah, I'm not John Boy or anything. I went back and watched to see, is he tipping the pitches? Like, why are they just not going after the breaking balls? It reminded me a lot of kind of how Philly, I think it was the 23 postseason, Philly just kind of keyed in on Spencer Strider, fastball, slider. The goal is we're going to sit on slider and just foul off fastballs, but we're going to sit slider. They just refused to sit slider. Here, they sat on the fastball. 27 swings on 49 of them. He picked up, I think, 3 total whiffs and 94 pitches. But that was something where the velo was fine. We always knew that he kind of ramped up the velo with two outs, with runners on base, things like that. I'm not concerned about the velo. I think the whiffs will be fine when he gets a team that'll go after the slider again. So this was the quintessential veteran starter who doesn't have his best stuff, but grinds through 5 innings and gives you a chance to win the game. This is not something we'd have gotten last year from Ronaldo Lopez. So this is growth and development right there.
Yeah, that's what I say. In a loss, I actually came out kind of encouraged from the start from Ronaldo Lopez. And in this one, it really came down. Brian Snitker decided to bring Dylan Lee out for a lefty, to begin an inning late, which I was okay with. He had a very efficient inning before that. You bring him out to face the lefty. Unfortunately, gave up the home run there, the difference in that one. But again, the offense just didn't do anything late. Kelenic had a big game-tying home run in that one, but the offense really went silent. After that, you had leadoff runners on in the 6th and 7th, but couldn't score. You had a runner at 3rd with 1 out, and then Profar and Riley had 2 just awful at-bats, I thought, in that spot. Profar just swinging at pitches up at the top of the zone, really getting out of what we saw him do for a lot of the weekend. Just some really bad at-bats there, not able to put in the run. The Braves were awful all weekend with runners in scoring position, except for Sunday when, as you mentioned before we came on, they just didn't have any. So that was the only reason why they weren't as bad there. But quickly, game 3, which was a quick one, a 1-0 loss there with the only run coming after a ball that goes off Aaron Bummer's foot into the dugout, leads to the only run of the game. Just unfortunate, kind of the way things went for the Braves this weekend. But Schwellenbach, I mean, I know you and I were both, not just you and I, a lot of people high on Spencer Schwellenbach coming into the year. We talked about it on the season preview podcast. And after one game, kind of looking like what many people thought he could be, just a dominant performance for Spencer Schwellenbach.
I kind of feel like maybe we undersold how good he was going to be after that. I mean, 6 innings, 1 hit. He did issue a walk. Shout out Jackson Merrill for getting Spencer Schwellenbach to walk somebody. Amazing at-bats all weekend from Jackson Merrill. But, I mean, he looked as good as we thought he was going to look. I genuinely can't think of anything else you can ask for from Spencer Schwellenbach. It's very possible he is the best pitcher in this rotation by the end of the year, and that's saying something when you're going to have Chris Sale and Spencer Strider. But showed you everything you could have possibly wanted to see and more. I love that.
Yeah, he was outstanding in this one. And then again, I think could be a big season for him, just to control all the stuff. I mean, you see it. And I keep going back to it because last year it's a kid that, he was a reliever in college playing shortstop, and he comes up, he hasn't pitched a lot, and he's learning on the fly at the big league level last year. And now, I mean, again, I don't think it's hyperbole to say I think he could be one of the best pitchers in baseball right now, pitching on a staff that had the NL Cy Young favorite going into last year and the guy who won the Cy Young favorite last year also in this rotation. And as you said, I don't think it's too crazy to say he might be the best one at the end of the season. So again, disappointing series, certainly not, getting swept, not ideal at all when you got a West Coast trip that involves the Dodgers. But I think there were some positives to take out of it on the pitching side, starting pitching side, the offense, in the first two games looking like a different version of itself. And then just not getting those results in the final two games. Like the defense was good in this one. They will win games against a lot of teams playing that way, and they are capable of playing better than that and beating teams like the Padres, who are a good team. I think many people saw the Padres didn't do much in the offseason outside of go get Pivetta and thought maybe they'd take a step back. That's still a really good ball team over there, especially with the way Pivetta looked, and Cease and King will look better than they did, that bullpen. And then at the top of that lineup with Tatis, Jackson Merrill was absolutely ridiculous in this series. Machado, Arise with 0 for 13, 0 for 14 in this series. Might have been one of the other surprising things. But that Padres team is still really, really good. Next up, we'll give our final thoughts on the weekend and then just quickly preview that Dodgers series. We got the rotation set for that. We'll do all of that here next. All right, Lindsay, before we move on to the Dodgers series, just my final thought on this weekend, something that I took away from this and get kind of your big takeaway from the weekend series. The difference in having a Tatis at the top of your lineup, like seeing him in this series just made me miss Ronald even more because he is just a game wrecker. And I know that, is kind of an obvious statement, but you fear when he's on deck. Like you fear when he's coming up. You fear when he gets on the bases. You fear what he can do with one swing of the bat in the plate. And it just reminds me how much we miss that with Ronald Acuna Jr. and how I cannot wait to have him back. But he was a game wrecker in this series. I know Merrill had the big series with the hits and everything that he was able to do, but it just felt like every time Tatis came up, he was a threat. And when he got on bases, he was a threat to steal. You saw it in Sunday, gets on, steals a base, comes around to score. I mean, it's just what he was able to do. It's what Ronald does for this lineup and really makes everything go. And the Braves just don't have that right now. Profar's good guy at the top of the order. He can get on base for you, but it's nothing like what an Acuna or a Tatis can do for you.
Yeah, I mean, he was 7 of 15 with a homer, 5 runs scored. He stole 3 bases in this series. Only struck out 1 time, I think is the big part of this. And it was something where obviously he was impacting the pitchers at the plate, but then he was impacting the pitchers on base, right? Stealing second, stealing third, even when he didn't steal, knowing that he could score from first on an extra base hit, going first to third on a single. It really, I'm not going to say it makes you kind of lock in, but it really makes you understand exactly how dangerous that team can be. And if Fernando Tatis can have a series like this every weekend, he could be back to MVP runner-up caliber Fernando Tatis. This was, hopefully it's not much more than a month or so before we get Ronald back like this. I'm still thinking early May when the Dodgers come to town, actually. But he did everything you could possibly want, made some good defensive plays, even robbed a home run. He didn't make the catch, but he robbed a home run from Matt Olson. I can't wait to have our version of that guy back because I think him and then Jackson Merrill's both defense and offense from center field, those were the 2 big differences in the weekend.
Yeah, and just the athleticism stood out from the Padres in this one versus the Braves. I mean, I felt like they scored 3 or 4 times from first in Sunday's game. They just have guys that can completely run, and the Braves just don't have that. They have to they either have to get those home runs or they have to string 2 or 3 hits together to score. They just don't have that athleticism. And again, that's a big difference without having a Ronald Acuna Jr. in your lineup. Obviously, he's one of the best players in baseball. Not having him in there is going to have a huge impact, but I think it does just make this lineup overall, less athletic than most of the lineups out there. But one final big point from you for the weekend before we get into the Dodgers series.
I'm not as worried about the starting pitching as I thought I would be. There was a lot of uncertainty, right? We don't know. We haven't seen Grant Holmes yet. AJ Smith-Shawver being in the rotation for the first time. There was a lot of questions. I'm not as worried as I thought I was going to be because there's plenty to build off of. And you were in all 4 games with these starters. And so it feels like this rotation will still be able to keep you in games. The question is going to be, can your bullpen hold the lead? Can your offense score enough to let you get your fair share of wins? But I'm not worried about the rotation. I thought all four of them we've seen so far have been good.
Yeah, I'd agree with that. I thought the rotation was fine. Like I said, I thought the bullpen was fine overall outside of, the Neris inning on Thursday. I thought the bullpen was good enough. And I think this offense will come around and win. I know you want to beat teams like this, and the Braves can. But as I said earlier, they play this kind of game against most teams in Major League Baseball. They're going to win most of the time. And again, a big key is going to be that offense and when can they get going? Because I thought the pitching was good enough to win each and every one of these games, again, outside of just that Thursday game where they had the big inning there. All right, moving our attention to the Dodgers series. We do know the rotation for the Braves in this one. It is going to be Grant Holmes in game one of the series, followed by Chris Sale and Ronaldo Lopez, taking on the Dodgers, who are 5-0 on the season already. Again, looking like the team that we all thought that they could be. I mean, some dramatic wins already early on against the Tigers. Mookie Betts loses 20 pounds, comes out and still able to hit big home runs for
two
them.
home runs in a game.
Yeah, it's just ridiculous what they're able to do. But that's what the Braves got to go up against to try to get their first win of the season. They're going to do it with Grant Holmes starting the first game. And look, I'm excited about the season for Grant Holmes. It'll be a tough test for him, though, to start his 2025 campaign, trying to prove that he belongs in the rotation.
Yeah, I mean, this is obviously the toughest team you could face. 30 runs in their first 5 games. They've hit more than 10 homers. No defensive errors. I think it's a big deal kind of there. They've drawn 20 walks. You have to have your A game. And this is something I like this test for him. I'm confident he can do enough to keep Atlanta in it. I think this whole rotation, I like the idea of throwing Sale and Lopez on regular rest. I know you're going to use extra starters. We did all year last year. We're going to do it this year. I like the idea, though, of throwing those guys on regular rest because you're sending your best pitcher in game 2. So Tyler Glasnow in game 1 against Grant Holmes, and then Chris Sale versus Dustin May in game 2. Ronaldo Lopez versus Blake Snell in game 3. Great pitching matchups all 3 days, honestly.
Yeah. Yeah, and anytime you face that Dodgers rotation, you're probably going to get an ace going up against them. So it will be a lot of fun, but it's going to be key for that offense. Can they get going against that good Dodgers pitching staff? And what does Grant Holmes look like? I think it'll be a big test for him. He doesn't seem like a guy that really gets too, caught up in the nerves or anything. Got the locks flowing. I mean, the guy just seems completely unfazed out there on the mound, and it'll be a big test for him on Monday night. Again, make sure you subscribe to Locked On Sports Atlanta. Hopefully me and Lindsay able to get the postcast going this week. I know it was a rough weekend. I don't think they're going to go 0-162, as I've heard some people saying. I don't think they're going to go 0-7. I think they're going to get at least one of these games in LA. Look, 1-6 doesn't make you feel too much better, but again, I think they will at least get one of these against the Dodgers and hopefully come back home and get on a good winning streak at Truist Park. Well, that would do this episode of Locked On Braves. Thanks so much for joining us today. Even with the disappointing series, I enjoyed watching some baseball over the weekend. Again, make sure you subscribe to Locked On Braves on YouTube or wherever you get your podcasts. Make sure that you rate, review, and subscribe to the Locked On Braves podcast, and we will talk to you next time.